Hi folks, welcome back to the shop. Today we're playing with the Table Top Dyno. And let me give you a quick idea of what we're trying to do here and why. Hopefully it'll sort of make sense. I'm trying to build that steam engine to actually run my swamp cooler in the summer. And of course we'll get into that whole project. There's a whole bunch of videos coming up on that. But to start out with, we really want to know how much mechanical power it takes to run the swamp cooler. And we can easily measure, this is the actual swamp cooler motor that is running the swamp cooler. Of course, not right now, it's stuck on the dyno. So what I did is I went up on the roof and I found out, I used my kilowatt meter to find out how many watts it was pulling and how many amps and what the power factor was. Now, if I put this down on the tabletop dyno and load this motor down to those readings, then I know how much torque, and of course at what RPM, this motor's putting out to run the swamp cooler. And so that gives me the data I need to be able to optimize the air conditioning compressor steam engine for running the swamp cooler. That's the whole idea behind that. And also, seeing as I can put the air conditioning compressor steam engine on the swamp cooler motor dyno, then I can actually measure its output and tweak its pressure and expansion ratio in order to make it efficient enough to actually work. At least that's the hope. And so, through the magic of video editing, let's head up on the roof with the trusty kilowatt meter, take a couple readings. First one's going to be the cooler motor running on low. Second reading is going to be the cooler motor running on high. All right, here we go. Cooler is running. You see the wire running up to the motor through my mess of connectors there. Okay, on low we're using 255 watts-ish. And let's swap over to amperage, 3.82 amps. We're running basically 5.6 amps and 430, 437, 438, 41, somewhere around 440 watts. Okay, we're back in the shop and you can see from that previous video that we have these values that we need to hit. So as it is, here we've got our tach, we've got our kilowatt meter to tell us our watts and our output watts. If you'll remember from the earlier videos, I've modified an ordinary scale from Bed Bath & Beyond to measure the torque output of this and see, so there's that. So let's fire this bad boy up and we'll load it down until we get to that 5.6 amps and 440 watts and see how much torque it's making and see how far the RPM bogs down. That way we can calculate our actual mechanical horsepower. So, okay, here we go. Let's turn this on. We're starting with our high RPM setting. There she is. All right, now we're at no load right now. So if you can see the tach, I may have to zoom in. Right now the tach's reading 1800 RPM, which of course makes sense. That would be our no load RPM for a, well, okay, it's dropping to 1760. That's the problem with this tach. It's not high enough resolution for what we're doing here, but it's gonna kind of have to do for right now. Notice we're getting a little bit of residual torque. That's because this motor does, of course, have some drag. But the cool thing about that drag is that it's being measured. So that's part of the total amount of torque that this motor is having to generate. So now we got everything all back together. Let's go ahead and crank up. Remember, we're looking for that 440 watts. And I think you can read everything. We'll see. All right, here we go, here we go. Ah, there you go. You can hear it starting to load down. Little guy's starting to work. Definitely starting to work. There we go, 429, 443. That kilowatt meter is kind of a little laggy it doesn't give an instant readout, so it's kind of a set it, wait for a second, set it, wait for a second. Let's see what we got, let's see what we got. A little bit more, a little bit more. Come on. There we go, 440. Okay, so basically 469 grams or gram-feet of torque. Oh, I wish I could get it right on. There we go, 440. Okay, we're gonna call it 472 grams. Yeah, because we're oscillating between 439. Yeah. More like 473 grams. Okay. So we're going to call that, we're going to call our torque. Come on, numbers, stop changing. Look at the numbers change. Okay, 440 watts. 476. I really think it's about 475 grams. Let's call it that, because that's pretty stable now. Okay, so we got 475 grams. Our RPM is reading 1720. Well, seeing as this tach doesn't actually give fine-grained data, that's probably really 1725. Seeing as that's what the motor is actually rated at under load. So I'm going to call it 1725. Now we can calculate our horsepower. But before we do that, I want to go re-switch the motor. And what we'll do is switch over to the low RPM side so we can see, find that data for the low RPM side. So give me a second here. I just got to switch a couple wire nuts here. All right, so let's see here. See if everything's cool enough for me to keep going. Oh, yeah, it's okay. All right, guys, so here we go. We're going to fire up and run on our low speed setting now. So we're aiming for 255 watts, and let's fire up and do that. Oh, let me re-zero that. I think I bumped it. It doesn't want to go back to zero. There it goes. Now it's going back to zero. Okay, good show. All right, here we go. All right, here we go. Now in this case, we're aiming for 255 watts on the kilowatt meter. This is reading our torque in gram feet or foot grams, however you want to look at it. Okay, a little more, a little more, a little more. Yep. 255. Oh, overshot. Let's see if it'll stabilize. Hey, there we go. 254. 255. Okay, it's oscillating 254 for 255. We'll call that good. All right, so we're at basically we're at about 220 grams, and our RPM dropped to 1160 from 1800. So that makes sense. All right, now we can do some math and figure out how much power this actually makes mechanically. And then we can also figure out the motor efficiency if we want to, because of course now we'll know the mechanical output power, and of course we know the electrical input power, and the ratio between those two is actually the motor efficiency. So, I mean, if it was 100% efficient, it would be putting out 255 watts of mechanical power or 440 watts of mechanical power. In this particular case, I know for sure it's nowhere near that efficient. Now that we have our data, for those of you that are interested in the actual mechanical output of this motor, the motor's over there, but I zoomed in on this so that you could actually see the calculations happen here. If I can get my stupid phone to work. Isn't it funny how rebellious these little bastards get, especially when they're on camera? I don't know what that's all about. It's like, it works fine unless I'm trying to video it. Anyway, all right, let me move this over just a little bit. And so you can see the phone. And okay, so here's our data. And in this case, our torque was 475. Now that's in grams, and how you convert grams into pounds is you divide it by 454. It's actually like 453.7 or something like that. But either way, I just go with 454 because I can remember it easily because, you know, Chevy 454. Anyway, so whatever trick we use, right? Whatever works. Anyway, okay, so we got 475. Oh, don't do that. 475 gram feet of torque. We're going to divide that by 454. Means it's making about 1.046 foot-pounds. Okay, that's 1.046 foot-pounds. And in order to get to horsepower, of course, we remember the age-old formula. It's going to be torque times RPM divided by 5252. So we got 1.046 times 1725 divided by 5252. That's going to give us our horsepower. So here's our torque without rounding it off. Times 1725 gives us a number. Divide that number by 5252. Our actual output is 0.343 horsepower, 0.343. So right now I've got this tuned up. I'm actually running it a little harder than I should on my swamp cooler because it's actually putting out a little bit more than its rated horsepower. It really should be 0.333 if it was putting out a third of a horsepower. So that gives us our high-speed horsepower right there. And that's what my little steam engine has to be able to duplicate. Now on low, of course, we can do the same thing. I'm kind of out of room. Hey, there we go, we can see it. All right, so here we got torque 220, so there's 220 divided by 454. That's 0.484 foot-pounds. 0.484 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're going to multiply that times our 1160, which was our RPM, gives us a number. Now we divide that by 5252. And there we go, 0.107 horsepower. Now, if we really want to mess with our brains, we can convert these horsepowers into watts, and that'll give us the rate, and then we can figure out the ratio of wattage to output power. Now, for instance, how are we going to do that? Like up here, we got 0.343 horsepower. Well, there's 746 watts in a horsepower. So if we take 0.343, we multiply that by 746, that means our actual output in watts is 255 watts. 255 watts, and this is on high, remember, we're on the top of the page here. So we got 255 watts of mechanical power, and we're putting in 440 watts of electrical power. So our efficiency is 255 divided by 440. So we got 255 divided by 440. So it's running about 58%, 0.58. So the efficiency of that motor, when it's running at that load, is only about, like I say, about 58%. And of course that's typical of like a swamp cooler motor. They're designed to be really, really cheap to build. They're not designed to be super, super efficient. Now on the low speed, we can do the exact same thing, and if you want, we can go through that. I don't know whether you want, but we'll go through it, and if you don't like it, you can skip ahead in the video. Anyway, so here we do the same thing. We take our 0.107 horsepower, multiply it by 746. That gives us our watts in mechanical power. I mean our mechanical output power in watts. So that's 79.822. Why don't we just call that 80? So we got 80 watts of mechanical horsepower, 80 watts of mechanical power being put out. And of course we're putting in 255 watts of electrical power. That's going to be a bad number. I mean, look at that. So we're going to basically call it 80 divided by 255. So there, our efficiency is really very low. It's about 0.31. And so that's kind of disappointing that it's 31%. It's so low, in fact, that it makes me worry that maybe I did something wrong here, but I'm pretty sure I haven't. We can go through the calculation again. Let's see, 0.107. Hey, magic, times 746. Yeah, we get the same number divided by 255. Yep, like I say, 31%. So these motors actually waste a lot of power, but that's not surprising. Like I say, they're designed to be cheap and easy to produce. They're not designed to be super, super efficient. One thing to remember if you actually do build one of these for yourself is that all of the energy that's being dissipated in the dyno brake motor is going into heating up the rotor, and there's no place else for that energy to go. So you don't want to just turn this on and let it run, because that rotor in there is just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And I can actually feel the heat coming out of this right now. But as a dyno, where it only has to run for, you know, like I say, 10-20 seconds at a time, it's perfect. It works very well, and you can do it with just an ordinary swamp cooler motor. It's pretty cool. Actually, you can do it with any motor. I mean, I could easily do this with like a 5 horsepower industrial motor, do the same thing. Have an engine turn the motor, feed DC to the motor windings, and use it as a brake. As long as I can come up with a setup like this, where I can measure the reaction torque, I can turn it into a dyno. Well, congratulations if you've made it this far. Next video, we'll be going into what it took to actually turn that air conditioning compressor into a steam engine. And there's going to be a bunch of machining videos coming up on that. We'll be making piston rings, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So tune in next time. I haven't decided what I'm going to call it yet, but it'll pop up. If you're subscribed and everything, it'll pop up. You'll see it. Anyway, so thanks for watching. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day or week, if it's that long before I see you again. And take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you next time. What's up, little dude? How's my buddy? Aw, you are the most chill cat I have ever had. You are so cool.